Jay Shear.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear,
business consultant.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear Business Consulting.
Welcome. I'm Jay Shear with Jay Shear Business Consulting. We build solid foundations for service-based businesses to grow and scale and achieve the results and success they deserve. And you've joined Business Minds Coffee Chat. What factors are at play when we make a buying decision? What if you discovered a scientific way to persuade anyone and close more business? On this episode, we're going to explore the neuroscience of persuasion, what you need to know, and how you can increase customer engagement and close more sales. Our guest has over 30 years of marketing and business development experience. He earned his doctorate in media psychology and is an expert on the effect of advertising on the brains of adolescents and young adults. He's a best-selling author, an award-winning speaker and researcher, and is passionate about understanding and predicting the effect of advertising, propaganda, and public health messages on the brain. Please welcome the founder and CEO of SalesBrain and the author of the Persuasion Code and his latest book, the Serenity Code, Dr. Christophe Morin. Christophe, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for inviting me, Jay. I'm delighted.
Absolutely. Well, I am super excited about this conversation today. You and I had an opportunity to have a conversation a while back, and I have just been enamored with the subject that you're an expert in. So let's dig right in, because I can't wait to unpack a lot of the science behind persuasion. So first, if you could share with us a bit about your professional journey and when you first discovered an interest in consumer behavior and the science behind buying decisions.
Yes. As you can see, I like brains. I have, of course, used mine as best as I could throughout my life, but I decided to pay more attention to the brains of people we're trying to convince and persuade every single day. Now, why this obsession for neuroscience or the brain? It is because in my research and experience as a chief marketing officer or CEO, I became more and more suspicious of what people could tell me of their buying experience. We have the ability as humans to talk, but we have very limited words to articulate our emotions, for instance. It is well known and understood that we can experience nearly 60,000 emotions, and yet we have 6,000 words. So as I was on a mission to always decode, explain, and predict consumer behavior, either face-to-face or online, it became clear to me that I should take the step of not just asking people to explain that experience, but measure it directly in their brain. And that move 20 years ago created a new branch in marketing called neuromarketing. The idea of bringing the study of the brain, which is the relationship between behavior and the brain, neuroscience, and marketing. And frankly, it's way long due for us to bring more science into a process that has been largely, I don't want to say artistic because it's going to sound like I don't like or respect art, but intuitive, not as rigorous as it can and should be to deliver results.
Interesting. So I'd love to talk first about SalesBrain. That you founded or co-founded that business, was it in 2002?
Correct.
So what was the catalyst itself for starting the business?
The catalyst was, to be honest, my somewhat frustration and fatigue of regular techniques to probe people's behavior. I was just sick and tired of getting data that I felt was just not giving me the whole story. So I went back to school first to educate myself on neuroscience. And then we started to use methods that were completely different For instance, we have software to decode people's micro expressions. So we can put people in front of a website or a commercial, and we can immediately, identify if they are happy, sad, or bored. We have software to track people's eyes and record where they're looking at and for how long. So we can make maps of where people's eyes are going and decode that early form of attention without asking anybody any question. We have the ability, of course, to monitor the brain. We can put electrodes on people's brain, and we can measure if people have a hard time thinking or understanding an ad. Do you know how many ads are immediately dismissed in just a couple of seconds because they create cognitive friction? And cognitive friction is not something that's super complicated. It's ultimately something that requires neurons in our upper brain. And we are extremely protective of those neurons and the energy that we need to think. I hate to say it, but we're not really good at thinking. We're really good at reacting. And therefore, I was able to identify that unless you can talk to that primal, primitive, early, and fast brain, you're never going to get to the thinking brain.
Wow. So prior to starting the business and really prior to digging into the neuroscience side of it, what were marketers using as ways to test whether what they're creating was effective, and was it connecting with people?
Two typical set of data, which in fact are still the lion's share of research today. One, which is called self-reporting data. So people doing surveys, focus groups, essentially describing their experience. I'm happy, I like this, I don't like that. That's self-reported. Then there's another form of data, which of course has been very popular, especially since the beginning of the internet. And that would be called behavioral metrics or web metrics. The extent to which people are actually clicking on something or scrolling somewhere, right? These are behavioral types of data. But this is not enough to decode and understand what's going on in people's head. And so I felt that we needed greater understanding of how actually we come to pay attention to anything. How do we even understand, believe a message, and ultimately move towards a decision? And that is what I found through neuroscience measures.
Wow. Incredible. So what are who's the ideal client that SalesBrain would work with?
A couple of companies that we have typically helped, smaller, medium-sized companies who actually want the best practices. They don't have much budget to do, sophisticated research. They want guidance. And that's why our book has been so popular, because our book is basically a to-do list from the science. I'm not just a scholar or researcher. I'm a business person. And so I wanted our book, our training, to help people, equip them with, ways to doctor their images and their messages right away. Then we have, of course, clients that are much better known, like Facebook, Intel, Microsoft, who really are cutting edge, and they want those kinds of insights that are now considered very precious, because if you can really read people's mind, you have a better shot at creating narratives and stories that are going to be most successful. So we've been able to serve, and I like that about our business, very, very diverse companies, because everybody needs a message. We've done a lot of work internationally. We have a lot of clients that serve, different cultures. And it's been a really amazing journey. After 20 years, we've served over 600 clients, trained 150,000 executives around the world. So that's a pretty incredible metric.
Yes, yeah, it definitely is. So, when you talk about serving clients all across the world and different cultures, are the ways that decisions are made, does that differ at all in different parts of the world, or because it's our brain, the decision-making process is the same?
So let's go back to these two brain systems that I've described. One, which is at the bottom of our brain, called the primal brain. It's when, as we evolved, all the software for survival, monitoring our blood flow, our oxygen through our lungs, our temperature, all of those functions are completely automated, and they are basically the same anywhere on this planet. I mean, why would you rewrite the software for humans in the end of the world, right? For breathing, digestion, and even sexual urges, right? On the top of our primal brain sits a very exciting brain called the rational brain, or the cortex. And that brain is kind of the one that we can program over time based on where we're born. We're going to learn a different language. Where we become citizens, we learn different cultural norms and adopt different beliefs, political, religious, what have you. So the new brain experience, if you will, makes us quite different from one population to another, but the primal brain experience is pretty much identical. Regardless of the country we do this work, we can identify ways to communicate to that primal brain that are going to work universally. And that we've been able to demonstrate with companies like Avon, for instance, a marquee client of us, which sells in over 100 countries and has 6 million women selling their products. So clearly, by adopting our model, they wanted to make sure it could work internationally.
Wow, that's incredible. So when a client, let's say the size of an Avon, is engaging with SalesBrain, just very briefly, if you could, walk us through the customer journey. So how does a customer come on board with you? And what is just kind of a thumbnail sketch of the process and working with them? And when would they start to see results and different outcomes?
Okay, sure. So typically a client will come to SalesBrain because they have some sort of frustration or fear that relates to their ability to decode their consumer behavior. So they like me 20 years ago, they're like, oh my gosh, I don't think we're collecting the right data. So they may be interested in adding data that would come from, neuroscience or measures. That's number one. Two, they realize that marketing is no longer this old-fashioned, course where we just talk about making pretty brochure. It is a science, and to really improve the team performance, if you have a marketing team, you need to train your team to the cutting edge science. So training has been the lion's share of our revenue. Schools, universities, I am a professor and I have created courses in university, but they were a bit late on the uptake. So they're kind of catching up. And therefore, a lot of executives came to us and said, we want to understand what the buzz is about neuromarketing, consumer neuroscience. We want to keep up. So the need really for us was to feed that craving for learning and upgrading people's understanding of the psychology of buying. And that's kind of how we onboard clients typically. Then we can do coaching, on a regular basis. We help clients review some of the work that they do. We want to make sure that they're still using our model and so forth. And we have lately created the possibility for a client to buy creative services. So they can buy images, they can buy, the little videos that we've optimized for the primal brain. What does that mean? Those videos do not require to read, to listen. They just bring you into a story in just a few seconds, and they deliver understanding that is compatible with the limited cognitive abilities of the primal brain. It doesn't mean it's a dumb message. It's actually a very smart message, but we need to work hard to create simplicity, because the paradox is it's very easy for any companies to be complicated.
So I would love to talk about how we're influenced. And if you could maybe give us a couple of examples of how neuromarketing is used and how that's impacting our buying decisions and influencing us to take certain actions.
Okay. Remember this, the urgency to influence or persuade is to create a primal brain friendly message first. You cannot go to cognition, which is typically located in our frontal lobe. You can't expect people to read. You can't expect them to compute. You can't even expect them to imagine the future, because in our primal brain, only now is real. If you have pets, and you and I share the love of cats, right? Watch them for just a few seconds and ask them, ask yourself, the real question, do they worry about tomorrow? You know the answer. They don't, right? So everything is about that presence. What am I feeling now? What am I doing? That's how you influence people first. You need to make them feel an impression of how important it is for them to wake up to the urgency of paying attention, how simple your message is to my primal brain, because my primal brain is optimized for quick decision. I don't want to agonize. I don't have the ability to analyze all the competition. You need to give me 2 to 3 reasons why you're the best. That's a primal brain friendly message. And you make it obvious to me and real to me by helping me sample your experience. So if it's a product, make me sample it. If it's a process, well, just describe it to me in a little video, but give me a mini sense of what this is all about, because that's what the primal brain wants.
Remarkable. So as you look at all of the different companies that are advertising today, maybe even, I don't know if you caught the Super Bowl, but even if you look at marketing messages during the Super Bowl, are there any particular marketing campaigns that stand out where you could point to them and say, they really asked some deep questions, right? They were doing some deep questioning about their clients before they put this marketing message out?
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but most messages, and particularly messages that people have paid 4 or 5 million to deliver, are not that effective on our brains, because they tend to go either too far in that creative, or production area, and they fail to understand the primal brain specifically. The first step to test a message, and especially an ad, is to turn the volume completely off. If there is a lot of talking, a lot of voiceover that is necessary for you to understand a message, it's not primal brain at all. So a lot of those ads don't even pass the test, because so much is based on dialogue. Dialogue doesn't sell. What sells is your ability to tell a story that is considered urgent, solving a pain or frustration that you've been reminded is unbearable. So good messages tend to magnify it long enough. David Ogilvy, probably the most brilliant advertisers of all time, famously said, advertising is easy. All you need to do is light a fire under people's chair and present the extinguisher. Right? Now,
simple,
David was not a neuroscientist, but he knew that you can't talk straight to the rational brain and make things super rational, buy my extinguisher, see how it works. Nobody wants to know how it works. Everybody needs to know why. I need it. Right? So too many of those messages tend to skip that pain point, and 2 of those messages tend to also say too much about how it works. It really is not important for us to know what it does necessarily. We want to know why, and we want to know that we're going to be healed. We have medicine, which is basically a product or a solution that are going to make feel better. Once we have done that, we can then bear to listen to a description of how it works and features and functions and so on. And so advertising is coded now and pretty well. But, advertisers are not easy to change. And their behaviors, to be honest, has been one that still is cryptic to me. They continue to believe, that creativity, unbounded, not science, will help craft good, campaigns. Sometimes it does, but many times it doesn't.
Wow. Well, for all of you that are either watching or listening to this right now, some amazing information was just shared with you. And I hope that you're taking notes. I hope you're listening to this, because if you own a business and you're looking to improve your conversion rate, attract the right kind of customers, be able to market your product or service in a way that's going to connect the right way with the primal brain, these are the points that you need to listen to. If you want to have effective campaigns, take notes. And we're going to be digging a little bit more into this, but I thank you so much for sharing this. This gets me pretty excited to talk about. So let's talk about for a moment the ethics involved in marketing, and really neuromarketing specifically, I've seen some case studies in the past where certain companies have used pretty interesting methods to market, and sometimes it seems like it toes the line of ethical behavior. So can you speak to that for a moment? What should we be paying attention to, and how do ethics play a role?
Yeah, and it's an excellent question, and it's been very important for me to answer that question. I joined as a founding member early 2000 years of the Neuromarketing Business Association, International Business Association. And so we noticed that the emergence of this branch of neuromarketing was a bit threatening to people who suspected or were concerned that maybe we were on a mission to put chips in people's brain and make them buy things they don't want. Marketing and advertising has been doing this for decades without science, but it is clear that by creating a new understanding of how the mind works, we need to be obviously very careful to not manipulate, to not extract insights that people don't want us to extract, and so on. So I actually wrote the code of ethics for the entire industry. And it was my first job at the association, because I realized we need to be transparent. We need to show that the intention is not to manipulate. The intention is to add valuable insights, and also show, which is really the case, that neuromarketing can help craft better public health campaigns. It can help us decode propaganda. And you mentioned my interest in that. I've been serving on a think tank put together by the Department of Defense, so that I can train and share with very, very senior, including generals, officials in the intelligence community that are on a daily basis trying to understand, why people join gangs or go and join terrorist groups. And a lot of that is because of messages that somehow have impressed on their brain to the extent that they just do something really crazy, right? So the point of neuromarketing and ethics is to show, like anything that has power, it needs to be used cautiously, ethically. We don't want, for instance, to invite people to an experience of having, electrodes on their head and keep them and force them to stay in that experience. So we give them the choice to opt out and get the money that they would otherwise get. We don't reuse that information to sell back to them, which was the problem with Cambridge Analytica and all this big monstrous scandal with Facebook, is because they really collected data on people's personality, and they used that data to manipulate them back. Well, that's not ethical. That's just not really cool. Unless they have full understanding that that data is effectively marketed, which I guess whenever we're on social media, we have to agree or disagree that some of our data and behaviors as they pertain to posted and so on are going to be known in public. But by and large, we need to make sure that vulnerable people are not manipulated. Young people, which are at risk of a lot of persuasion manipulation, and elderly people or people who have mental disorders or issues. So you're absolutely right. It is a critical aspect of any form of science and use of science. Sometimes you need laws, government control. Some European countries, for instance, have been a little more aggressive to protect young people, especially from advertising that's too manipulated. The American view, as you know, traditional is less laws, more trust. Ethical guidelines do exist, but they're not easy to enforce. And so it's a good step in the right direction, but sometimes it's not enough.
So it takes time, obviously, to institute change like that. Are you starting to see more dialogue, more conversations in the United States around ethics in these areas? And
Absolutely.
And very specific things, very specific actions that can be taken?
Yeah. So there, of course, laws are enacted at a slow pace. And unfortunately, when a field starts emerging, real quickly, the legal process takes time to catch up. But there are more sensitivity to monitoring messages that are deemed either to lie or manipulate. As you know, in this country, it is effectively illegal to misrepresent or deceive customers. Now, how many get caught? It's not always easy. But we have social media now that I think is giving a megaphone to people who are unhappy, who can report very quickly stories that they're just unacceptable. So I feel that this feedback loop of social media, and we complain a lot about the negative aspect of social media in polarizing, conversations, particularly in the political space. But there are good, ways now for all of us to voice, our anger, our displease with brands or ads that just go too far. I mean, and we've seen ads kind of disappear. People apologize. That would never happen, back in the 70s or 80s. Exactly. So I remain optimist, but I do think education is key, and really being able to dialogue and openly discuss what's acceptable and what's not.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It makes perfect sense. So let's get tactical for a moment. So you shared a minute or two ago about some things that businesses can do when it comes to advertising and focusing on the why, right? Looking at those pain points. So if you were sitting across right now from a small business owner who came to you and was looking for some help, what are 2 or 3 suggestions that you would provide to that small business owner? Maybe something that they could start doing immediately to put into practice.
So first of all, instead of listening to me, which I hope is captivating, we have a poster that is on the back of our book cover if you want to buy the book, or even better, free on our website. So you can take a look at that poster to really see and understand the teaching points of our model. The teaching point starts with, you really need to be aware of what that primal brain is, and you need to understand that we use that primal brain first before we use the best of our thinking. That's number 1. 2, we talk about 6 qualities your messages should have to be effective. And to me, a message could be a website, it could be a corporate video, it could be a pitch. So whether you're in business to consumer or business to business, it doesn't matter. You need to make your message very personal. You need to bring that pain right away. That's your best way to recruit. You need to contrast life without you, and it should suck. It should be ugly. It should be frustrating. And life with you, because contrast is a super quick way to accelerate decisions in the primal brain. You need to reduce the cognitive effort. Make sure that whatever you talk about is easy to understand and believe. You need to repeat your message with a limited number of 3 reasons to make it memorable, because repetition makes something more easy to remember. You need to deliver your story visually. That means no bullets on PowerPoint slides, no voiceover, no text, but just a message that can deliver a story that will give people's appetite to read and look at your numbers. And finally, and this is such an important aspect in advertising in general, regardless of what you sell, even if it's somewhat like a serious product, right? People believe and tell me, well, we're accountants, and so, we just got to keep it dry. Why? That doesn't work with our primal brain. Dry or neutral is the death of your message. You need to be willing to create an emotional cocktail. You can surprise people. You can remind them how ridiculous it is for them to accept the risk. Use humor to dramatize their pain, and then show them how incredibly liberating it is to work with you. So these 6 conditions are the language of the primal brain, but it requires 3 things. And those are the 3 things hopefully you can do after my talk. 1, you need to be clear on the pains you can eliminate better than anybody else. So pain diagnosis. 2, out of all the reasons you're currently using, and I bet you're using dozens, pick only 3. This would be called your claims. And number 3, make sure you never talk about a promise, a claim, without bringing the evidence of this to be real. So customer testimonials, a demo. So we explain pain, claim, gain is really the narrative structure of your message. And then you need to deliver it to the primal brain, make it visual, intuitive, emotional, and that's it. Et voilà, as we say in French.
Wow. Fantastic information. Again, everyone, please take notes. And we're going to provide some links in the show notes here, but what a great resource, not only the book itself, but the website. Take a look at that information and make sure that you're applying it. And let's test and see what kind of results you get from this. Fantastic information. So I want to switch gears for a moment. So your most recent book, The Serenity Code, you and I had an opportunity to chat about this briefly when we had our original conversation. It's an intellectual yet a very practical book that explains how we can rewire the brain to heal ourselves, to reduce stress and anxiety, and to experience more serenity. Before we dig into that a bit, what was the impetus behind writing this book?
So this book was very personal and a very important project for me. Pre-COVID, I was on planes every other week. Last year, I did 2019. I did 250,000 miles. And it's a little challenging to concentrate on a new book when you're on this kind of agenda, and also stressful. And I found myself feeling anxious and worried and dismissing that energy that was sort of sipping away from me because of stress and anxiety. And of course, COVID brought the ultimate stress and anxiety for me, which is you can't travel anymore. So other than the immediate loss of business, which everybody has experienced, it really kind of put me in front of the wall, so to speak, in terms of what I could do to be this time facing my own anxiety and stress, and do so the way I love to do it, which gives me energy and joy, and that is writing and researching. So I had basically an impulse, you can say, to write this book during COVID, and of course made it possible for me to do that very quickly, and with the ultimate goal of helping also the millions of people who are experiencing a surge in their own stress and anxiety. So I just felt the timing was superb. I poured myself into it, and of course I wanted to decode what anxiety is in the brain, as well as stress and some of the risks of depression. And it became really incredible for me to see that we have naturally in our brains ways to heal ourselves. And, coming from a scientist, I weigh my words. I'm not saying I have a magic wand, but plasticity of our brain is a fact. And what does it mean? It means that we can change certain circuits and rewire certain aspects in our brain. And when we do that, specifically targeting anxiety and stress, we can heal ourselves above and beyond, medication, therapy, and all that, which is not something that I don't recommend. We have the ability to adopt habits that are natural healers. I'll give you an example. Walking in nature. It's obviously clear that walking in nature is, enjoyable. But what we don't know until I digged into the science is that it can improve your immune system. It can reduce your stress. It can bring back cognitive clarity. So we need to do it, not just once upon a time. We need to do it every single day. Spending time with your pets, animals and their boundless love is healing to all of us. It improves our level of oxytocin, which is this wonderful neurochemical that makes us feel attached and loved by others. So there was research that was available bringing this idea of being with a pet as a healing mechanism to our stress and anxiety. And I identify, a total of 7 habits, which I know can bring more serenity. And that's the essence of the book. You're right. It is about understanding yourself and how personality affects, certain responses. There is an intellectual component to it, but it moves into the practical aspect of how you can change your behavior to feel better. And that's kind of the model of the Persuasion Code. There's a science piece to it. And then, okay, what do you do with this? Well, Serenity Code is the same. There's an assessment tool. I encourage people to go to the site that I created called the serenitycode.com. I do provide the assessment data for free. And I'm on a mission to really help as many people as I can. So thank you for helping me, talk about the book.
Absolutely. Well, it's clear that you are executing on your mission, and just having these kinds of conversations and sharing your knowledge and your insight it's changing lives. I would love to find out from you about any type of routines that you have, whether it's a morning routine, an evening routine. And again, this is tying back to the Serenity Code for a moment, but things that you're doing. So walking in nature obviously is one. Meditation. Give us just a sampling of what you do every day and the impact that's had on your life.
Yes. So the 7 are designed to target very specific brain systems. So the first 3, for instance, are really about targeting the primal brain. And so when you walk in nature and you play with your pets and you work on your breathing. So breathing techniques are well known, well established to have been integrated in all kinds of practices like yoga, of course, meditation and other practices, including running. I'm a runner, and so I now try to practice my running with additional mindfulness around my breathing. And it's amazing how so many of us are poor breather, and we need that healing factor of oxygen, right? Then you have other aspects that are a little more common, but using music to change your mood and controlling the kind of music you listen to make sure it restores serenity. Heavy metal is not exactly that choice, right? So there's all kinds of choices that we have about using music to calm and heal us. The same is true of laughter. We forget that laughter is healing. When we laugh, we produce endorphins in our brain. So it makes us basically heal ourselves. And of course, once again, you have to seek to engage with situations where you can laugh. Stories have a huge effect on our brains. And we, for thousands of years, have learned from stories, have kept us, engaged with stories. And so we have a craving to move ourselves, to transport ourselves in others' minds. And that effect of transportation, in a way, gives us an opportunity to see ourselves, to heal ourselves, but also to forget ourselves. And so I talk about the neuroscience of story and the neurobiology of story and the effect that they have. And the last one is really a brand new topic for me. It's going to appear a little strange, but it's really spiritual behaviors and traditions. I was never raised religious. I was more of an atheist, frankly, my entire life, until I had very profound experiences, particularly in South America, in the thick of jungles. I had an experience of being able to access this spiritual portal. And without getting into too deep considerations, I was finally in touch with something bigger than myself, right? And the ability to get to that level gave me tremendous serenity. And so I talk about, prayers, meditation, all forms of practices that are known to access or to get to that spiritual dimension, which is a little bit higher than, our traditional experience of ourselves. We are one from many on this planet. So I talk about all these methods as, frankly, methods that people should practice every day. I pray every day. This is something very new for me, and I find it extremely, extremely healing. And it doesn't need to be calling on, gods or anything, but just the bigger powers out there that can reward me and encourage me in my own struggles.
Yeah, this is very, very powerful. And I'm just curious, have you, through your travels and as you were really going down the path of the spirituality side of your being, had you tried any plant medicines, ayahuasca ceremonies, anything along those lines to try to raise your level of consciousness?
Yes, I did. And I did it in my early 50s, totally scared and totally skeptical, and really with the wrong attitude, because you don't get into plant medicine work just because you want to have a good time. And if you do, that just typically doesn't work. So you do it because you're trusting that these substances have been used sometimes for thousands of years to expand consciousness. So I started my work with ayahuasca specifically 10 years ago, and over time, it's given me a tremendous amount of healing, a tremendous amount of insights about myself, about my relationships with my family members, with my wife. It's just given me an expansion that I was fighting. Now, I am not, and this is an important aspect in the book, I am not telling that all people need, plant medicine or psychedelics to, find serenity. I do believe that there are other alternative methods, breathing techniques, for instance, a prayer or meditation that absolutely do not require, these catalysts. But it is, in my case, what gave me that kind of a rapid track, if you will, to that experience. And now I can reproduce that experience without, the requirement of plant medicine. And so that's how I got to it. And in a late stage of my life, it was really important for me to get to that level of consciousness.
Amazing. So I would love to find out from you, what are 1 to 2 books that you could recommend outside of your own? Obviously, those are books that we would want to get our hands on, but 1 to 2 books that have had a dramatic effect on your outlook on life.
Yeah. So for Persuasion Code, I would absolutely highly recommend a book called The Paradox of Choice by Dr. Barry Schwartz. He's a psychologist. It's a very enjoyable book about the paradox, as the title says, of us thinking that we want always more choice. And we have evolved, particularly in the last few decades, in a world that constantly gives us more choice, but how at a very primal level, we hate choice. And it's a very important subject if you're a parent to really understand how you navigate and to some extent reduce choice for your own children. So I really recommend, there's tons of examples of situations where we can learn from being happier with less choice. Okay. And surprising topic, fabulous. He has also a TED Talk, which has like 12 million views. Barry Schwartz, look for it. It's extraordinary. For the Serenity Code, there's a few obviously that are important, but all the research on the neuroscience of prayer and searching for God is fascinating, even if you're an atheist. Andrew Newberg is a remarkable writer about the topic. He's a neuroscientist. He put nuns and Pentecostal practitioners in functional MRI, and he asked them, and monks, he put monks into functional MRI, these scanners that can read your blood flow. And the reason he did that is he wanted to find out, what are the changes in our brain when we pray or meditate. And so he wrote 2 books, which are absolutely superb and easy to read. You don't need to have a PhD in neuroscience to read it. It's called Why God Won't Go Away, okay, and Why We Believe What We Believe. And both of those books are absolutely superb in really challenging your understanding of certain states that are still, mysterious, like prayer or meditation, and how we can begin to really understand what they do to our consciousness, right? So for instance, for prayers or meditator, he was able to find that this area in our brain that seems to locate us in a particular place, that seems to ground us as being part of this planet, so to speak, those areas do not work anymore. And so he argues, and it's an assumption, right? He argues, well, if meditation and prayer is able to kind of lock or freeze that area, maybe that explains why we no longer locate ourselves on this world, but in another world. Why we see ourselves as one of many instead of our little, being. So it's really fascinating. Of course, as a scientist, I love these challenges, but it's a great read.
Fantastic. That is fascinating. I'll have to check those out. Thank you for those recommendations. I appreciate it. So what would you like your legacy to be, Christophe?
My legacy would be that I've done a good job sharing all I know, either to business people to improve their lives and their business, or to individuals to improve their lives and their ability to face, challenges which are inevitable. We all have lives that are full of hurdles and moments of frustrations and sadness and sometimes despair. We all have sometimes children, family members that are really, really going through a hard time in their lives. And so I hope that I can provide good insights to enable people to sustain and heal. And I'd like to, share as much as I know so that others can share that knowledge, which I think can be helpful, both for business purposes and personal purposes.
Beautiful. So as the saying goes, pain is inevitable, suffering is optional.
Yeah. Yeah.
So before I ask my final question to you, where can we go to connect with you and to consume your incredible content?
Yeah, so obviously my books are available on Amazon, and the Persuasion Code is now in 13 languages, I believe. Serenity Code is also going to be in multiple languages, but yeah, you can get those books on Kindle and print and what have you. I think we are very generous on our website, so you can learn a lot about the model on SalesBrain.com for the Persuasion Code, or the SerenityCode.com without purchasing anything. I do have programs on video. So I just released a program for the Serenity Code, which is a couple of hours. And for those of you who prefer to listen or view, that's a good option instead of reading. I do blog quite a bit, especially on LinkedIn. So if you are interested in anything that I've talked about, follow me, please, or connect with me on LinkedIn. I do tweet a bit, and Facebook not much, to be honest. But yeah, these are good ways to track and follow what I'm doing.
Outstanding. Well, we are, again, as I said earlier, we are going to link to each of these areas in the show notes. So everyone, there is no excuse for not connecting with Christophe and consuming his content. So here is my final question to you. What's one of the greatest gifts that life has given you that you didn't realize at the time?
Wow. It's given me so many gifts. And certainly one that comes to mind is two boys that have taught me a lot through their own struggles, including fighting disease and really scary moments, if you will. And so I think as parents, we can see those struggles as punishments. But what I've learned, especially in my plant work, is that everything is teaching us something, including struggles, including pain, including suffering. So I've come to learn that. And you're right, not wanting as much trouble, but knowing now that it's part of my journey. So I feel blessed. I am a very grateful person. And every single day, I recognize how lucky I am.
Outstanding. I tell you, you're giving me chills kind of thinking through what you're talking about. So, Christophe, thank you so very much. I mean,
you're welcome.
What a fantastic conversation. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you sharing and just providing me and providing our audience with so much valuable information that we can take away and start to work with and apply. So thank you. I'm grateful for you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. And for all of you, thank you so very much for watching and listening. And please take a moment to subscribe and let Christophe and I know what you think of this particular episode. Share maybe one or two of your favorite takeaways. And to enjoy more episodes and to learn how Jay Shear Business Consulting can build a solid foundation for your service-based business, just visit jayshearbusinessconsulting.com. And until next time, keep learning and growing. Read and apply the principles in the Persuasion Code, and we'll see you on the next Business Minds Coffee Chat. Take care, everyone.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear Business Consulting.